and ask the Chief Executive to take us through the first two items of the agenda, which is the notice and summons of meeting and members' attendance and apologies. John.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and good afternoon, members. To all members of Derry City and Strabane District Council, you're hereby summoned to attend the special meeting of the Council to be held remotely today, Monday, the 1st of March at 4 o'clock. And as the Mayor has said, starting with the attendance record, Alderman Breslin.
Here, John.
Alderman Devaney.
Here.
Alderman Guy.
Here, John.
Alderman Hussey.
Here.
Alderman McClintock.
John.
Alderman Carrigan.
John.
Alderman McCready.
Here.
Alderman Ramsey.
Here.
Alderman Wark. Alderman Wark. Councillor Jason Barr.
Here, John.
Councillor Raymond Barr. Councillor Raymond Barr. Councillor John Boyle.
Here.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
And Shaw, John.
Councillor Burke.
And Shaw.
Councillor Carr.
Here, John.
Councillor Cooper.
Here, John.
Councillor Cusick.
Here, John.
Councillor Dobbins. Councillor Dobbins. Councillor Donnelly.
I'm Shaw.
Councillor Doyle.
Here, John.
Councillor Duffy.
And Shaw.
Councillor Durkin. Councillor Durkin. Councillor Edwards.
Here, John.
Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Ferguson.
Here, John.
Councillor Fleming. Councillor Fleming.
John, he'll be on shortly. He was just making his way to his house.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gallagher.
I'm Shaw.
Councillor Harkin.
Here.
Councillor Jackson.
I'm Shaw.
Councillor Kelly.
I'm Shaw.
Councillor Logue. Councillor Logue. Councillor McCann. Councillor McCann. Councillor McGuire. Councillor McGuire. Councillor McHugh.
Apologies from Murray.
Councillor McKeever.
Here, John.
Councillor McKinney.
Here, John.
Councillor Mellon.
And Shaw.
Councillor Mooney.
John.
Councillor Riley.
Apologies.
And Councillor Tierney.
Here.
And I see Alderman Wark there coming in. And Mayor, just checking. Councillor Raymond. Councillor Raymond Barr.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's on the chat box here, John.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dobbins. No. Councillor Durkin.
Shaw.
Thank you. Councillor Logue. No. Councillor McCann. No. Councillor McGuire. No. Thank you, Mayor. Back to yourself.
Thank you, John. Thank you, members. Members, item 3 is the broadcasting statement for remote meetings. So I would like to remind everyone who's in remote attendance that this meeting will be broadcast live via the Council's YouTube channel and will also be available for viewing by the public and the media. The broadcast will also be available for repeated viewing at a later date. This broadcast may also be terminated or suspended in accordance with Council's protocol. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. By participating in this meeting, you're consenting to be filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. A copy of the Council privacy notice may be found on the Council website at derrystrabane.com. John, just as I'm reading that, Councillor Logue has also joined us, so she can be marked present, please.
No problem, thank you.
Thank you, John. Item 4, declarations of members' interest, which I'll take now or as they arise throughout our meeting, members. No. Item number 5 is chairperson's business. I have no chairperson's business today, members. So with your indulgence, I'll move on to item number 6, is the mayoral address, striking of the writs for the year 2021 to 2022. Today, Derry City and Strabane District Council has agreed its budget for the incoming 2021 to 2022 financial year. As Mayor, I want to record my thanks to members and officers for all of their work in what has been an extremely challenging writs process, and confirm that Derry City and Strabane District Council has made and fixed a district rate of 30.9537 pence in the pound for non-domestic properties and 0.5103 pence in the pound for domestic properties for the year ending the 31st of March 2022. This represents a 1.89 district rates increase for all ratepayers. When coupled with the regional rates freeze, we'll see overall rates bills increase by 0.99%. For an average domestic ratepayer in this council area, this will see the current average domestic district rates bill of £484.69 increase by 9.16 per annum, or 18 pence per week. On the basis of an average property valuation being lower in this council area than any other council area, the average ratepayer in the Derry City and Strabane District Council area will continue to pay lower rates bills than the majority of other council areas. For businesses impacted by the pandemic, council is very hopeful that the rate support provided by government will continue into 2021-22. The last year has seen unprecedented financial challenges for our residents and businesses. It is therefore more important than ever that a realistic rate is struck that recognises the challenges our ratepayers face, but also sets council on a sustainable footing to play a critical role in recovery and to continue to provide the essential services our citizens require. Accordingly, the 1.89% increase represents the lowest increase ever imposed in this city and district, and it is the lowest sustainable rates rise that could have been achieved without adversely impacting on the services and programmes. The pandemic has resulted in significant new cost pressures for council to ensure critical services can continue in a safe and compliant manner. It has also seen us lose a substantial portion of our service income, has created uncertainty around a rates-based income on which we rely to fund 80% of our services. Thankfully, pertinent financial management during the pandemic, along with very significant government support, including the rate support for businesses, has ensured council's finances have been sustainable, and at least in the short term, we hope for a positive recovery. Beyond these pandemic challenges, significant recurrent pressures totaling 3.09% have been absorbed. In particular, regionally agreed pay awards have had to be forecast and provided for. Insurance costs have increased, and waste budgets have come under pressure as a result of significant rise in volumes and disposable costs. Against this, there is again a number of very positive messages from this year's rates process. Despite the pandemic, new property development has seen 0.6% improvement in our rate space. Significant effort has continued to drive savings, and further efficiencies totaling £599,000 has been realised, with a further positive 0.99% benefit for ratepayers. As a result, efficiencies realised since the amalgamation of the legacy councils has now reached a cumulative total of almost £4 million per annum. It is also pleasing to report that 0.39% of the rates increase represents growth and new service development, as well as new resources to support Irish language and climate change initiatives. This year's rates will see a further investment in council's ambitious capital plan. Members, over the last few days, I have been honoured as Mayor to sign the heads of terms on a £250 million City Deal and Inclusive Future Fund investment package. This is the single biggest investment package ever secured in this city and region, and will see the creation of 7,000 new jobs, £126 million in new wages, and £230 million in GVA per annum generated for our area. The rates increase will provide council with resources to drive forward this integrated and ambitious suite of innovation, digital, health, regeneration and tourism projects across the city and district, and will also secure council's required match funding contribution to the overall package of investment. Critically, alongside the new rates investment, will enable further delivery of council's ambitious programme of community capital investment and other strategic projects. Having completed £60 million of capital investment over the past few years, a further £55 million of exciting further projects are now progressing towards completion. Progression of the 3 significant cross-border greenway developments from Derry to Buncrana, from Derry to Muff, and Strabane to Lifford, totaling £20 million in euros. Development of the new £9 million Riverine Shared Space Community Park project between Lifford and Strabane. Advancements of a range of community centre developments at Waterside, Shared Village, Glenview, Shantallow, Gallia, Culmore, and the Ballymagorty Hazelbank. Continued development of play facilities, pitches, recreational facilities, and shared spaces across the council area, including at Ardagh-Yarvin, Castlederrick, Dunnamana, Mahermason, Newton Stewart, Sion Mills, Prahane, Mourne Park, and new buildings. Provision for a new city cemetery provision on the west bank of the city. Council's key priority this year will be continue to work with all of our partners and government departments to deliver on our objectives and targets for our strategic inclusive growth plan 2017 to 2030, which aims to make a thriving, prosperous and sustainable city and district with equal opportunity for all. Members, in conclusion, the agreed district rate increase will continue to drive growth and investment in this city and region, and will also ensure continued delivery across all of Council's frontline services, from street cleansing and waste, building control and planning, and environmental health, grounds maintenance and parks and cemeteries, leisure, sport, health and community development, and support, and the vital corporate services. Thank you very much. I'm just going to go through the list here, members, if you can just bear with me. John, there's a few members who have arrived late there. I'm just looking in the chat box.
I have them there, Mayor. Councillor McHugh, Councillor Dobbins, got both of them there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. The first member that I can see indicated to speak is Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, from our perspective, this is a historic day. Lowest rate being struck by this council has been set since 1974. And that's, from our perspective, is an unbelievable outcome, given that less than a year ago we were envisaging a 15% rates increase to deal with the impacts of COVID. Only £11 million of executive support, we've created a scenario where, as Finance Minister Conor Murphy requested, we strike a rate as low, as close to zero as possible, without reducing council services and impacting on council jobs. The proposed 1.89% increase will allow our council to maintain the delivery of frontline services at current levels, protect the jobs of those council workers delivering those jobs and those services, and also ensures we can cover the statutory pay rises which we're currently negotiating with the trade unions. It also, as has been said, protects funding for capital projects, including the start of work on the Templemore and Riversdale sports complexes in terms of planning for those. Protects council's match funding for our city deal, tourism and city centre regeneration projects, which all create hundreds of jobs in their own right when they're implemented over the next few years. And as has been stated, also allows us to proceed with community centre plans, play park plans, greenways, and environmental projects across the city and district. And taken alongside the regional rates freeze confirmed by the Finance Minister, it means a real terms rate increase of less than 1%, which equates to, as has been said, less than 80 pence per year for the average ratepayer. The figure also builds on provision for council to aim for a low rates figure next year, which is absolutely crucial. Doubly important, as the economic fallout from COVID will undoubtedly have an impact for several years to come. Had we struck a 0% rate this year, this council would have been required to strike an historically high figure, in our view, next year to ensure our financial position did not deteriorate even further. There are those in this chamber who refuse to support the 1.89% figure. SDLP aim to keep the people before profit, and most independents called for a 0% rates increase, but offered no suggestions how this could be achieved without impacting on council services or projects. True, there was an attempt made to put the onus back on central government to provide extra support. Now, every councillor in this chamber knows full well the Finance Minister can't provide clarity on the level of finances that will be available to councils until the executive budget's announced, and that budget is not being struck for several weeks, while this council was legally obliged to strike a local rate by last Friday. All our parties, and particularly SDLP, were well aware of this, but decided to pursue a headline which would never have applied had they held the Finance Ministry. They also voted for higher rates increases in all our council districts. People can see through that for what it is. I also hope that councillors who turn up for the launch of council projects that are funded by this rise are reminded that the 0% increase that they were proposing would never have seen those same projects get off the ground. And similarly, the next time people before profit raise the issue of protecting workers' rights, they should be reminded the 0% rate increase they supported would have prevented a statutory pay rise for all
As
council
Councillor
workers.
Cooper
Sorry,
that
sorry.
Excuse me, members, excuse me.
Chair, I don't think you can let that go. Is Councillor Cooper asking that if councillors who don't support the writ will be questioned
Councillor
if they turn
Donnelly,
up
Councillor
facility?
Donnelly, Councillor Donnelly, you'll have an opportunity, if you put your name in the chat box, they come back at Councillor.
Point
come
of
back and-
order, Chair.
Point of order, go ahead.
Is Councillor Cooper saying that councillors who don't support this writ should be questioned if they turn up the council facilities?
I didn't get finished with my points.
Excuse me,
That's
Councillor
what it
Cooper.
sounded like to me.
Well, right, we're not having a debate across WebEx between yourselves. Councillor Donnelly, I don't know who Councillor Cooper is suggesting is going to question. Councillors, maybe if we allow him to finish his remarks, we might find out.
How long are you going to let him talk? I thought it was 3 minutes. Time.
On proposing a motion, it's 3 minutes, Councillor Gallagher, under standing orders. Councillor Cooper isn't proposing a motion. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor, and I haven't even spoke for 3 minutes, but I've made the point, so I'll not go back on it. I think his point's been well made. I was about to say the next time the people before profit raise the issue of protecting workers' rights, they should be reminded the 0% rate they supported would have prevented a statutory pay rise for all council workers and threatened council jobs as services were cut back. In summary, this year's rate provides our citizens with a rise that is both historically low, but which also allows council to pursue the key projects which will help us emerge from the COVID crisis with hope for the future. And that's something which we all need at the present time, and that's why we were happy to propose a rates increase of 1.89% last Friday, and we're glad that that was supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor McKinney.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me in. I'd like to say thank you to Alfie and his team and the statement from yourself, Mayor. We agreed to the small increase in our rates level. Our officers have examined our forthcoming budget in fine detail. If we make no increase, we will have to use our financial reserves, but we need every penny for the secure the full city deal funding from the government. Salaries take a large part of our budget, but pay levels are not in our control, nor would we want to restrain the pay levels of our staff, which already have been agreed by government level. We could raise the entry fees to leisure centres, but a pandemic is not the time to discourage people from healthy pursuits. We could cut services, but no one wants a reduction in the bin collections or the closing of recycling centres. And if we don't meet our recycling targets, we will be fined. We could cut street cleaning, but no one wants dirty streets and unhealthy streets. We could cut maintenance of the parks and playgrounds, but the pandemic means that these are needed even more than usual. We could cut business support services, but these crisis periods need to assist jobs, not limit them in any way. A 1.98 increase will cost the average household what you stated earlier there. I can't remember, Mayor. Right? In this time of health and financial crisis, we don't want to add even the small way to burden our business and families, but we ask the community to work with us on this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McKinney. Alderman Guy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to thank Alfie and his team, John, and of course yourself there for your speech, and providing the detailed financial reports for not just the process of the annual rates, but for the reports throughout the year, especially in the year that was due to the challenges brought forward and faced by this council due to the pandemic. Considering where we started from, and there's had to be various cost-cutting exercises to get to the 1.89 increase, whilst we would have all loved to have had the lower rate of a 0% increase, we would have been realising that there would have been tougher cuts imposed in this council, cuts imposed on staff and so on, which we weren't willing to go down that route, with the main outlay being for staff pay and so on. I note those calling for a 0% increase haven't come forward with any other ideas of how we get the 0%. So I'll just leave it there and thank Alfie once again. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Guy. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor, and previous speakers. Best thanks to all of those involved in reaching the point that we have within the striking of a rate for the incoming financial year. Indeed, the majority of folk that I meet understand fully the need for rates to be paid in order to provide proper council services throughout our entire district. On that, I don't have an issue with the present proposal of a 1.89 uplift and would support that. Rather, my issue lies on the other side of the equation that is our rates process, namely the distribution of rates benefit with equity. And, therein I constantly meet with agreement throughout my Derry electoral area and beyond. In your speech, which I didn't get the whole of, Mayor, because my connection cut, but at some stage I'm sure we'll get a copy of that. It would have been nice to have had a draft before you said it, but going forward. In your speech, you talked about growth and service development. And indeed, while services such as bins collections are excellent throughout our council area, there are areas of provision via the rates benefit that are already identified as provision deficit, not alone in the Derry electoral area, but throughout the entire district, with specific regard to those areas outside of the boundaries of the City of Londonderry and Strabane town. It's to be welcomed that the City and Strabane have received a major shot in the arm with the recent welcome City deal announcements, but it also serves to cut areas outside of those boundaries further adrift in provision. An identified deficit exists in areas such as play areas, playing pitch provision, shop front enhancement, town centre regeneration within our rural settlements, and so on. There's a need for this council to proactively address the identified areas of concern to the point, I would suggest, of positively discriminating towards ongoing capital projects resulting from our rich distribution that we all contribute to in order to restore an equity of provision across our entire district council area. I do have a proposal that I will bring the next council meeting on that at the end of the month. You'll be glad to hear that final part to my contribution, Mayor. But whilst welcoming the proposal of a reasonable uplift in the rates, my concern still lies with how that is distributed beyond the boundaries of the city and Strabane town. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. Councillor Logue.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wasn't, I don't think it was my turn yet, but I would just like to say just a short statement. As elected members, we have a public duty to act with leadership, honesty and integrity, and to be accountable for all our decisions. And a guide for our responsibilities can be found in the Councillor's Handbook, and which is located in the library section of our online resources. For me, there has been an abdication of those responsibilities by many holding this office. The Chief Executive clearly advised on Friday of the implications of striking an 0% rate, which would have resulted in job losses, the loss of service provision, and our capital ambitions would not be realised. So for me and our party, the striking of the rate at 1.89%, which has been the lowest since 1973, I think has to be commended, and given the times that we're in it. And this will allow for all our capital projects to be realised, protect jobs and services to all our ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Logue. Councillor John Boyle.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if you're picking me up or you're okay there, Mayor.
Yes, John, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, clearly we've heard from the defenders of this particular uplift in rates, notably Sinn Féin, the Ulster Unionist Party and Alliance, and I think it has to be put on record as well, the DUP supported this, and on behalf of the SDLP, I think it's important to go on record and say that we didn't support this particular uplift. We felt that it would be wrong at this particular time to place an additional financial burden on local people through increasing their rates in the middle of a global pandemic. And Mayor, in the past year, people have been forced out of work. They've witnessed their incomes drop. They've been on furlough. Many people have been forced to rely on food banks. And on top of that, if that wasn't enough already, businesses have had no great opportunity to trade. So many business owners will struggle to reopen when the lockdowns end. And as such, we felt that the last thing that these hard-pressed people needed at this time was to receive a further rates bill beyond that which they could probably have struggled to have paid in the last financial year. Mayor, in January, the Finance Minister indicated that he had around £300 million to hand back to the UK Treasury. That's the Finance Minister, Conor Murphy of Sinn Féin, who have done a fair bit of spinning already this afternoon. The SDLP at that time called for the rate support grant to be reinstated and protected, and yet the Department of Communities, once again, a Sinn Féin minister, regret to say, Derry Hargy, only reinstated it for 2020-2021 with no protection for this in our future rate cycle. That's what we're up against. We're up against people in Stormont who are not really genuinely supporting us, and it has to be said. In contrast to that, Mayor, and if you want to cast your mind back, my colleague, the SDLP Minister of that time, Mark H. protected the rate support grant within his department, and it is quite simple, really. Had Minister Hargy done the same, then today's rates rise could have been significantly curtailed, and that's what we were looking for. And that's why we could not have supported this on this particular occasion. So, Mayor, look, striking the rate, it's been extremely challenging for Council. We all understand that. The incomes of Council, of course, have plummeted through this particular pandemic period, and the SDLP wanted to try to best protect people who have also seen their incomes dramatically reduced in the last year too. But we are where we are. The nature of the democratic process is that Sinn Féin, the DUP, the Ulster Unionist Party and the Alliance Party have foisted this upon the people of Derry City and Strabane District Council area. Others in this chamber will, of course, also have their voice heard today. But can I just finally thank the Chief Executive, the Senior Financial Officer, Alfie Dallas, and his finance team for bringing this forward to us. I understand and appreciate on behalf of my colleagues, it was, of course, a difficult conclusion to come to. And can I finally just, for the benefit of Councillor Logue, to question or impugn the honesty and integrity of anyone in this particular chamber. Genuinely, Councillor Logue, you should not be doing that. We all have the best interests of the people of our city and district at heart, and I have to say I'm quite gobsmacked actually that you would question otherwise. I certainly wouldn't question it of you. But again, Mayor, thank you very much. It, of course, notwithstanding all of the important ambitions that we do have as a council going forward, we support them, we do, but we also have to bear in mind that we're here to support the people and they come first.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me in. And Mayor, I would be minded that having the lowest rates increase in 49 years terms from the 73-74 to the 2021-22 is maybe not too badly being foisted upon people, as has been commented there. But Mayor, I would like to thank all the staff who have worked on the rates process across all the departments. They've had to look at their own budgets and look at their costs and their expenses and have helped reduce us, Mayor, to the rates figures we have today at that 1.89%. Pay particularly thanks to Alfie and the team along with him. Alfie's usually the one that's always named, and he can take the credit and he can take the blame, but he's well used to it. But I know there's been a massive amount of effort. I know we've had a lot of meetings, Mayor, over the terms there in relation to this. but there's a lot of background work has to go on to produce all these papers, and there's been a massive effort put in there to get us down to this 1.89%. That's right across council. This did start in double digits last autumn. We were well over the 10% figure, and so the effort has been put in. But again, Mayor, there's thanks as well. We've had assistance, we've had help from the government at Westminster, and of course from the Stormont Executive, and we have received a fund there in relation to the COVID support, Mayor, in the region of 14 million as local council, and that has come from, in particular there, the Executive and the Department for the Communities, the Department for the Environment and Rural Affairs, Department for Infrastructure, Department for the Economy, and this includes, Mayor, 2.2 million in regards to the airport, which is constantly a bit of a noose about the council's neck. But Mayor, we have taken our time. We've taken our time in this rates process, Mayor, and we have again, we paused there and we wrote again a letter to the Executive seeking additional funding to seek to try to get the rates down to zero. And Mayor, if the money had been available, Mayor, we would have been supportive to get it down to that zero rate, but we weren't able to get any additional funding, Mayor. And there were members and there were parties and individual members here who called on that zero rate. But Mayor, other than looking to get the funding from somewhere else, no one was willing to come up and detail where the cuts were to be made to get us down to 0% rates. Mayor, from the calculations I'm told, we needed an additional 1.2 million, and there was no one was able to come up and say, what are we going to cut? What services are we going to cut? The wages do make up the largest part of our expense, almost around 48%, and with the wages being set, the increases in the wages being set outside of our control, that was a cost that was going to increase. So we still had this 1.2 million to make up, and those calling for 0% rate could not identify where any of these cuts were to be made. Now, Mayor, the DUP are a party of low rates, and Mayor, I am content that we have been prudent in the rates process and prudent on the figures that have been set. We haven't eaten too much the reserves and everything else. I'm more than content on the work that's been done on it, and we are continuing in this as well to have growth built into the rates process, and that will help with strategic growth projects right across the council. And I know, as has been stated there, Alderman Hussey has that concern, and many of the rural councillors across the Derry, the Strabane and the Faughan will have the concerns about getting funding outside of the city and outside of Strabane town, and we all have these same issues, and we will be seeking to continue to work on that, Mayor, now that we have set this process. But the rate increase here, Mayor, at 1.89%, it is the lowest as far as I see here, particularly on the old city council, from the 73, 74 rates, and that there now onto the 21, 22 rates is a 49-year period. And so, Mayor, on these figures, again, it would have been nice to have got it to zero, but Mayor, being prudent and to rather than grab a headline, we are content with a 1.89%. I say the lowest rates increase in 49 years of the council. So, Mayor, we are content. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Kerrigan. Councillor Harkin.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, so first of all, I wanted to say I'm sure everybody has heard the awful news that Bank of Ireland are planning to shut down over 100 branches across Ireland, including the Strabane Road one. And I think we could probably collectively agree as a council, we send our solidarity to those workers and their families, and that we as a council should make sure that there's not a smash and grab on workers' rights, as we've seen in so many other places like Debenhams. And it's terrible news for families to have that right now in the midst of this pandemic, but not a surprise given the way that these banks and corporations have functioned in the pandemic or outside it. So look, this has been a miserable year for the vast majority of people. It hasn't been a miserable year if you're a billionaire or if you're big corporations, because those people and entities have actually seen their wealth absolutely skyrocket. But here in Derry and in the broader Derry and Strabane district, we know that many people have struggled. They've been out of work, they've been on reduced hours, they've been on furlough, they've been put on the universal credit, they've been going to food banks in the largest ever numbers we've ever seen in our district. I know there's been some representatives talking about setting records for rates, but the number of people going to food banks should be the one that we are most concerned about in our district. We have skyrocketing child poverty. So this has been a very hard year. And I think in that context, trying to burden people with further burdens is just completely unfair. And we need to find a way of actually having those who have benefited during the crisis actually begin to pay for our public services. But there doesn't seem to be any creativity coming like that out of the executive. So it has to start somewhere. So we believe it's unfair to ask people to pay up more right now. And it's not just that. I would say that the executive, right, rather than helping people through this crisis, has actually botched it. We've had taxi drivers falling through the cracks. We have skyrocketing workers' rights claims where workers' rights have been trampled on left, right, and centre, where there's been very little protection for people. And so, in so many ways, the executive hasn't actually stepped in to protect people. And then we hear the news, as has been previously mentioned, that hundreds and hundreds of millions in COVID funding has went unspent. I mean, this is absolutely shocking. When people are on their knees in our district, going to food banks, worried that they're never going to have a job to go back to, we find out then that from the finance minister that there's hundreds of millions that couldn't be spent to help people. And that's money we believe should have been flowing into this council. And there should have been a plan for it. So it's in that context that we think any increase in the rates this year on people would have been absolutely wrong. And we think that the vast majority of people across the district will agree with us. You can't further burden people given the great challenges that people are facing, especially when hundreds of millions of pounds could have been redirected into our council they actually help with services. So just to conclude my remarks now, there are it looks to me like Sinn Féin, DUP are reading off one script. Maybe it was jointly written that they would come in, and I'm sure a lot of people listening, if they do listen or if it gets reports on, will be bemused at Sinn Féin DUP's newfound interest in workers' rights and wages, because I haven't heard them talk about workers' rights and people fighting for higher wages in a long time. They certainly haven't done that in the executive over the last 20 years. They weren't thinking like that when they were putting low-paid workers and hitting them with Tory welfare reform. So, the level of hypocrisy here when it comes to workers' rights is absolutely shocking. And what I would say to workers is, across the board, it's clear that, as Siobhan O'Neill said, the councillors here on Thursday, the mental health champion, poverty is a political choice, and that our executive, led by Sinn Féin DUP, is making poverty a political choice for far too many people. So we as a council can't act as a vehicle for further austerity and cuts for people. We have to start standing up against this, and we have to send a message to the executive that further burdening people in Derry and Strabane and right across the district is completely unacceptable right now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. Councillor Michaela Boyle.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to put on record a thanks to Alfie and John and the team for what they have done over the course of the last few months. Obviously, due to COVID and the massive reduction in council revenue streams from rates, leisure services, building control, tourist attractions, all of the cultural events that we would have made massive impact on, we've been facing a potential rates increase of up to 15%. So thanks to the council officials for their work on this. And as council officials outlined to all councillors last week, the stark consequences of cutting the rate any lower than the recommended 1.89%, and that this would entail cuts to council job services and indeed a lot of our strategic capital development programmes throughout the entire district. So getting the increase down to 1.89% was in no way an easy task. I just want to say, just councillors who voted against this slight increase today, I would have liked to have heard them spell out what services and projects that they would have cut to reflect what they were proposing. And I can say, Mayor, I for one did not put myself forward to elect for election to sit back and let others make decisions on my behalf. So striking the rate is never an easy thing to do. But as others said, it's part of our responsibility as elected reps to ensure that we have the funds going forward for the key projects right throughout our council area. And I just want to in reference to Councillor John Boyle's remarks in terms of a global pandemic, I acknowledge his comments around, the stress that people are under who are on furlough and who are turning to food banks as we speak. However, how does he account for his colleagues in other council areas, who struck a rate? The pandemic didn't just affect Derry and Strabane council area. It's across the board, as he knows. So throwing the dummy out of the pram when he's challenged for not striking the rate, I think it's a bit, there's no consistency there. It has been difficult for everybody, and that's been acknowledged across the board here this afternoon. But I believe, what we have done today has protected many key services, facilities and jobs and projects as a result. And I just want to echo my party member, Mickey Cooper, and his comments earlier, an increase at an absolute minimum, while at the same time ensuring the protection of frontline services and capital projects is never an easy task. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting us in. Mayor, and for the record, I didn't support this rates rise, and I did want a zero rise as been advocated by others. And when I hear some of the councillors, like Councillor Logan, Councillor Cooper, and Councillor Michaela Boyle, and they're talking about those who wouldn't support the rate rise, and when you hear the words about honesty and integrity, you won't hear them telling you that part of this rate rise is because we have to cover a service that has been cut by one of their Sinn Féin ministers, Derry Harrigan, sorry. She cut and proposed to cut 1.5 million from advice services that this council has had to pick up. That's why we're having increases. That's why we couldn't get to a zero rate, because their minister is imposing cuts. You won't hear that from them. You won't hear anything from them that we're paying 3.5 million for an airport down the road, when only a few years ago, Mickey Cooper and his councillors, Sinn Féin councillors, were standing down there with a big cheque for £7 million. They won't tell you that cheque bounced, well and truly bounced. This council did not receive one penny of that £7 million, and the ratepayer in this district continues to bail out that airport to the tune of 3.5 million. They won't tell you that in their honesty and integrity. You see, when it talks about the projects this council's taking forward, as much as Sinn Féin would like to, they don't own them. They're paid for by the ratepayers of this district, and that's who owns those projects. And whoever represents them can turn up to any project they like. Mayor, I will just by finishing off by saying there was alternatives. There was. And he's handing back, Finance Minister handing back millions upon millions of pounds. We could have struck a zero rate and looked for central government to back up and to ensure there would be no job losses. That's what we should do as a council: provide and give leadership and protect the ratepayers of this district, who have time and time again come out and supported this council through the pandemic and took guidance from this council and this leadership to ensure that there was minimum risk to this district. And that's what they get, hat back up the mouth with a rate rise, regardless of how they want to sell it, of how small it is. Regardless of that, people are on furlough. People are now going to lose access to services that might stop them losing their job. They might stop them losing their benefits. They might stop them getting access to services. That's what Sinn Féin will refuse to tell you Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Members, can I just ask for the remaining speakers that we try and address the business that we're here for and not have a fighting match across this virtual chamber, please? Councillor Raymond Barr.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to be on the saying the rates increases of the previous 4 years and Derry City and Strabane District Council was above the national average, the 6 counties. I felt as others did in the present circumstances. The Derry City and Strabane District Council public should not have been burdened with another rates increase. I do take exception to Councillor Cooper's remarks, Lambast and other councillors for not sharing the Sinn Féin viewpoint on the issue. Those remarks fly in the face of democracy and are totally disrespectful of fellow representatives and what's supposed to be a democratic forum. And just for the record, I would have put public and business welfare in the district before capital projects this time round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barr. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me in. And I hadn't actually intended to say much today, but what I have heard here from other parties and independents is actually quite a lot of politicking around a rates process that was always going to be difficult. We can all sit here in our houses and we can blame the big bad executive for them deciding to vote against today's rates. But I will say this, and for those of you that are confused, the SDLP are part of that executive. I know that at times they pretend that they're not, but they can't fool everybody all the time. They are a member of the executive. Everyone can sit here today and say that they would have preferred a 0 rate. Absolutely, so would I. But to get to 0 would have taken some really tough decisions on jobs and services. Sinn Féin weren't prepared to do that. And no one who voted against the rate has given any credible solution to how they would have achieved a 0 rate. Not one. So now, in terms of the big bad executive, let me be really clear again, reinforcing what my party colleagues have already said. If it hadn't been for the executive, we would be sitting here looking at a rates increase in double digits, possibly as much as 15%. The executive have provided £11 million of intervention to this council area. That has included £1.5 million COVID recovery, £1.5 million COVID support, £5 million to cover the losses that we have incurred, including to leisure, care parks and planning. They have provided £1.5 million for waste management, £2.2 million for the airport, and £500,000 then for rate support. So this nonsense has to be nailed. We have had more than our share of support from the executive. In terms of what Councillor Gallagher is saying around advice services, Deirdre Hargey, as a minister, knows the importance of advice services. She has placed that importance there. She has put her budget out for an EQI assessment because she wants the money to continue with advice services. I think that what Paul Gallagher is doing, or Councillor Gallagher is doing, is deliberately trying to mislead the public on this, and I think that that is wrong and that needs to be called out. It's really easy for us all to sit at home and say, I want and I wish, but unless you can come up with a solution, a plan, or some sort of action, there is no point, because it will never happen. Today is a fair rate of 1.89%. It protects jobs, it protects services, it protects the statutory pay increases, and it allows for growth. And you see, as for people before profit talking about workers' rights, what about the workers who work in the council? Do they not matter to people before profit? Because the 0 rate that they wanted would have ensured that those workers, some may have lost their jobs, some may have had their contracts reduced, and some wouldn't be getting their statutory pay increase. So that's a question that people before profit need to answer. In terms of everything else, I put on record my thanks to Alfie and the team. You see everything else on here today, it's nothing but electioneering.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Doyle, Emmett Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. I wonder, could we get on the record and make sure that it is minuted that the Sinn Féin group leader just said that we have got more than our fair share, because no harm if that's what Sinn Féin thinks our fair share is. Is it any wonder that the election results of the last local government election were as they were? Consistent with our position throughout the process, Aintree will be voting against this increase today. It puts more pressure on residents and businesses at a time of unquestionable hardship. How anyone in this council doesn't see the hypocrisy of Sinn Féin supporting the increase is beyond me, but allow me to inform the public. Not weeks ago did we have a special meeting of this council to fast track funding to our community partners to help feed families, heat their homes, and allow children to continue to learn remotely. We're all represented on the Poverty Working Group, and we've all supported the creation of a hardship fund. Did we think that all those who needed support were not ratepayers? We said all that, and yet now when the time comes for clear action, those supporting this raise will shrug off that there is any link. The magic money tree hasn't been shaken. It hasn't even been touched. Every single meeting of this council, we hear how great parties ministers are. There were hundreds of thousands found for Belfast art venues, not a thought for Derry by a Sinn Féin minister. No recurrent funding to lift the burden of rates here despite a call by none other than the Sinn Féin finance minister. They said a zero rate. And it must be said, Mayor, when 15 million was paid to MLAs of all parties for salaries and expenses while it was doing nothing, there were gasps when it was suggested that this money could be spent elsewhere. I've raised consistently that the proposed cuts of 1.5 million to advice services and 57.7 million for welfare mitigation by a Sinn Féin minister. First, welfare reform didn't exist. Then it did, but they'd mitigate the effects. Now we see their true colours, implementing Tory austerity. Can they blame a cut to the block grant? They tell us that has happened? No, because it's actually increased. More bluff and no delivery. The pandemic has knocked families and businesses to the ground, and those supporting this rate raise are putting the boot on. They wouldn't take this burden from the backs of the ratepayers because the big golden goose projects must be protected in budgets. The maze still lies empty and still costs money, but we daren't touch it. Special advisors still cost us money, but we can't touch those. The SIF slush fund costs us a fortune, but again, we can't talk about that. When people ring the busy lines of our community partners seeking support with food or fuel, they don't do it to give Sinn Féin MLAs Facebook opportunities, handing over care packages. They do so because they're under pressure, and they increase this bill, another bill landed on their doorstep, while knowing that is cruel, even for them. And I'm not sure of the process, Mayor, if there's a vote to come from this, but if there is, I'd like it to be recorded. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Members, again, I'm going to ask you to try and stick to the topic of discussion that we're here to discuss. Next on the list is Councillor Paul Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me, Brian? Aye.
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Fleming.
Brian, a couple of things, and I appreciate you're asking about in terms of politics. I mean, I think there isn't a meeting goes by, but this attack on Sinn Féin is a dominant feature, and unfortunately, other people have brought it to the floor today again. But first and foremost, I would like to thank Alfie and his team and all of the councillors who have tried to grapple with this issue at this particular time. The other thing we've had from some people in terms of rates, this year, the year it's in it, we have people here sitting who haven't voted for a rate only in the year that there was an election. So I would just ask people to consider that and whether that's consistent degree of service. In relation to, and we hear this time and time again, and as far back as welfare reform, and the people who are saying it, people before profit et al., have been successful. They've fooled the people on this occasion around welfare reform. Sinn Féin was the only party that actually stood up to welfare reform. And what's also missing from these people's narrative, and quite deliberately missing, is Tory austerity. And the reason it's missing is to cover up the fact that they have done nothing whatsoever at any stage to actually turn back Tory austerity. Sinn Féin have faced the Tories down before and will continue to ensure that we bring about a society that is fair to all. And we will go back to people and make our case on the door. And people will see, in terms of some of the lies that is put forward at these meetings by people who have the gumption to actually face up to where real austerity comes from. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Councillor Donnelly,
That's Chair, and Chair, look, I will be voting for the writs, and one of the main things that I've never voted for the writs is because every year after year we pay maybe 200, 300, I think this year it's 400,000 in the PCS. Chair,
I've lost Councillor Donnelly.
Chair, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, Councillor Donnelly.
Chair, year after year, we're told that there's nothing we can do. That's just the way it is. And, you know, we're being told here by some councillors today about the handbook has been quoted to us. We're being told, you know.
Councillor Donnelly's gone again.
It's not Sinn Féin's fault, Chair.
Please, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Donnelly, we can't hear you.
No, 0%. Can you hear me, Chair?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Chair, we're told that they get 0%, that we would have to make tough decisions, and that's right. But Chair, there's no denying that the connection between Stormont, what Stormont does or doesn't do has a ripple effect on our council, whether you support Stormont or not. But we continuously pick up the charges from Stormont, whether it be cutting the grass verges, whether it be supplement welfare rights money that's cut, whether it will be the airport. Chair, people told us that when they were going into Stormont that there would be a battle a day politics. That hasn't happened. In fact, one of the comments here today was that we've got more than our fair share. That's even worse than half a loaf politics. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Mellon.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I know you want this meeting to be productive, and I acknowledge the hard job that you have here today trying to manage it all. But I think given the accusations and the comments that's been made, it's only right to refer back to them and make a response. Sometimes I be confused within this chamber when we talk about the executive. We seem to be the only party in the executive by all accounts, these other members. And we're not. It's a 5-party coalition. There's a lot of people there, and I suggest the members on here would use their own ministers or their own MLAs to lobby on behalf of the city and district, not constantly look at ours, because the well done's better than the well said, and that's why we refer back to our ministers, because they are fighting a battle a day between the populist politics that's coming out of here or the headlines that people seem to want to grab. I just want to speak on a few points, and I know this has been raised before in other meetings around Sinn Féin saying there's an ownership of projects. There's no one stating that anyone owns them. We're clearly pointing out the hypocrisy of councillors like Councillor Gallagher, who would rather risk cuts for the purpose of populism. And just some clarity on Councillor Raymond Barr's saying it's his democratic right to speak and vote on these. Of course it is. And nobody is more promoting democratic rights than we are here today, and we do it every day as elected representatives. But be prepared to challenge your void in leadership whenever you abstain or go against striking these writs today, whenever it is for the benefit of our city and district. And I just want to touch on the welfare issues that both Councillor Doyle and Councillor Harkin has referred to. And they've alluded to the Tory austerity. I'm glad to see that they're calling the cuts for what it is. The British Empire's continued oppression on our people, and all the more reason for United Ireland.
Thank you, Councillor Mellon. Last indicated speaker, Councillor Stephen Edwards.
Thanks for that, man. And I'm going to keep my comments brief because I wasn't intending speaking today, but I think the political spin here today is crazy compared to what we had in the private conversations. But the stuff coming from Sinn Féin, for me, it's a school of Donald Trump politics, Mayor. That's all I hear. The SLP have been consistent in looking for 1 or 0% increase. And yes, we take on that the SLP are an executive, but it's Sinn Féin who have DSC, they're in charge of local government. They also have the Minister of Finance, who's in charge of the purse strings. And if they think that we got our fair share from DFC and the allocations, they're definitely wrong in that, Mayor. People are on their knees, multiple job losses. And Strabane today, the Bank of Ireland, and in Derry as well, there will be multiple job losses. People are suffering financially. And I've heard as well about asking what's different in our council, Mayor. Our council tops the charge in terms of deprivation, unemployment, poverty, year on year, Mayor. It's the top 3 of the UK, how bad it is. And this has got worse during the last year of the pandemic. So hope those who have supported a rates increase will be able to explain to all our constituents in the weeks to come their position on it. Because for me, I'm proud that the SLP we're supporting 0% for every man, woman, and child on the street who are suffering right now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Member, there's no further members. There's no further indicated speakers, and just some members had stated in their remarks that they weren't sure whether there was going to be a vote today or not. Just to be clear, members, there's no vote today. The vote was taken on Friday. Today is for the official statements and comments by yourselves. So there will be no vote today. And I think it was Emmett Doyle, Councillor Doyle, who asked for the vote to be recorded. In my memory, Councillor Doyle, that vote was recorded on Friday. And I'm going to John Boyle with a point of order.
Well, it's a point of good order, Mayor, and that is to point out to all of those who come online here and talk about, in quotation marks, our minister. There is no our minister. The minister appointed. Minister, well, the minister.
John, it's not a point of order, John.
Well, it's a point of good order.
Sorry, it's not. It's not a point of order.
There is no our
members.
There is no our minister.
Right, John, thank you. Councillor Boyle, thank you. Thanks for that. So, members, just to recap, there will be no vote today. The vote was recorded on Friday. And all those members who were present and voting, that was recorded by the Chief Executive. I'm going to pass to the Chief Executive now, as there's no further indicated speakers to read the statement. John.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members. So, concluding today's meeting with the statement, Mayor, if I can just read this out. As Chief Financial Officer, in line with Section 6 of the Local Government Finance Act 2011, I am required to report on the adequacy of Council's reserves for a financial year. With due regard to Council's in-year positive financial position, the significant support received from Government, the contingency funds earmarked for financial risks associated with the COVID pandemic, and Council's current general fund balance of 5.133 million, I confirm that this reserve will be adequate for the financing of Council services for 2021-2022 and is in line with the Department for Communities guidance of between 5% and 7.5% of the net operating expenditure. Further to this, and having considered the detailed report of the Lead Finance Officer on the rates estimates for the year ending 31st of March 2022, I confirm that the Council hereby 1. Approves the rates estimates for the year ending 31st of March 2022, totalling £65,845,803 and authorises the expenditure included in the said estimates. And 2. Under and by virtue of the powers contained in Section 3 of the Local Government Finance Act Northern Ireland 2011 and Section 112 of the Local Government Act Northern Ireland 2014, and by any other acts and orders hereunto enabling, makes and fixes a district rate of 30.9537 pence in the pound for non-domestic properties and of 0.5103 pence in the pound for domestic properties on the rateable value of every hereditament in the district, as the respective amounts required to be made by means of each rate in respect of the year ending 31st of March 2022. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, John, for that. Members, that's our business concluded. Now, with your permission, members, Alderman Hussey had contacted me earlier today with an issue, an urgent issue, that he wanted to raise under Chair's business. I missed the email, so it's my fault. So with your permission, and my apologies to Alderman Hussey, I want to jump back just for a very brief discussion around the sorting office in Castlederg. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor. Very much appreciate the opportunity. I have notified Derg and indeed Spurn councillors read the issue. The sorting office officially moved today to Strabane, and I'm reliably told by postal staff that the operation that they went to was a complete shambles, with a total absence of social distancing for those workers who went in there to try and deal with the sorting of mail, which was then to be brought to Castlederg. I understand that there may actually be mail which was just simply not able to be sorted or brought on to Castlederg. It's a major issue that has arisen within the Castlederg area, but the impact that it's having within the Strabane sorting office is unacceptable. I understand that a couple of more experienced postmen have been asked to go into the sorting office Strabane tomorrow morning for about 7:15 to try and assist with sorting this out. But I am concerned about the working environment that they will go into. If, as is reported, there is no social distancing, what powers does this council have to perhaps attend in the morning when the workers are in doing this work to ascertain that social distancing is properly being followed within that office in Strabane? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. Councillor Stephen Edwards.
Say a few short words. Mayor, completely agree with Alderman Hussey there. I received the same correspondence as himself, and it is. They've been warned about this. Alderman Hussey, myself, and other Derry councillors have warned Royal Mail about this. You did yourself, Mayor, in writing to Royal Mail. But it is deeply disappointing that we've got reports today around social distancing and safety in the workplace in Strabane. And I just want to come in and fully agree with Alderman Hussey on that, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I concur with the remarks from Alderman Hussey and Councillor Edwards there. Mayor, it's been a disaster, this whole thing, when this move. It hasn't been well thought out at all. And Mayor, it's putting these staff at risk. And even the sensible thing about, I know there is potentially working to try to get another office left in Castlederg, because the post, I'm told from the postmen that they're meant to be back and meet that 4 o'clock post to take it back to the sorting office in Strabane, because with the working regulations, my postman went up past here at 4:10. Now, he's not near finished his route, so how's he meant to be back to leave the post that he hasn't got dropped off back in there for 4 o'clock? You know, it's not well thought out at all. It's very amateur the way they've done it, and Mayor, fully support the comments here that has been remarked, and if there's anything we can do to try to help the actual staff on the ground, because, you know, they're hard working, they're more than obliging, and they're really being put at risk by this, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Kerrigan. Councillor McHugh.
And obviously concur with the previous speakers. And if ever there was a case of "we told you so," this is certainly it. The Royal Mail were told that this was going to happen, and now we've seen the outworkings of their intransigence and arrogance. I suppose is a word that Councillor Hussey has used before, and it's a word that I would use myself. I think it describes them totally and all over. And as I say, I concur wholeheartedly with the previous speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. I'm going to ask the Chief Executive to come on this also. John.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on the back of members' comments, Mayor, we're very happy to send correspondence on this issue to Royal Mail immediately after this meeting this evening, and also to send in our environmental health staff into the sorting office tomorrow to meet with management and and give an opinion on the practices there tomorrow, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, John, I think it would be helpful. And if those members who have already spoken could give us an indication in the chat box, if they think that's something.
Mayor, if I may, yes, totally agree. Particularly welcome if environmental staff can be in there in the morning to observe and check on that. It's an unacceptable situation. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Sean Harkin.
Thanks, Mayor, for letting me in on this. Yeah, look, this has been an ongoing issue here, and I attended the first meeting where the Royal Mail didn't turn up for, and they don't seem to have changed their attitude. You know, it gives you an insight into how difficult it is for the workers there having to deal with management. We can see it ourselves now as elected representatives from the councillors. They've no respect for us either. This is why it was so important that workers in Derry decided that they would refuse to work in an unsafe workplace. And that sometimes is the way that workers have to deal with this, because they're not getting the kind of answers that they need to get. But I want to go on record as saying I believe that this is the ethos of privatisation is running right through Royal Mail. They are no longer functioning, especially the top bosses, as an accountable public body, and that's the problem here. When we get more and more privatisation, they have no respect for elected representatives. They have no respect for elected shop stewards and the workers that actually work for them. So I think we have to do everything we can, sticking up for workers, but also sticking up for the people that Royal Mail serve on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. Councillor Raymond Barr.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel I have to add my voice to this as well. I brought this up last May. There's been issues around the post office in Strabane since last May, and I have to agree with Councillor McHugh and Alderman Hussey, and I'll use that word again: arrogance. Any approaches made by public representatives have been just met with complete contempt and arrogance by Royal Mail. You know, I think the gloves have to come off, because we can't let a public body treat representatives like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barr. Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, Chair, thanks for letting me in. You know, if workers are in a workforce that's unsafe, then they should remove themselves from that. I remember similar conversations here. I think it was brought by Councillor Harkin, and that some of the elected members here were less than enthusiastic about a council response. I welcome the response today. I think it's a way to go. And I just hope that the next case comes in, that the same enthusiasm will be shown. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Donnelly. Members, no further indicated speakers. The action that the Chief Executive has outlined will be actioned as soon as this meeting's finished. And hopefully we can see a way forward in this. Thanks to Alderman Hussey for raising that, and all the councillors for their comments. Members, that's our meeting today. Our business finished. Once again, on your behalf, I just want to thank the John, Alfie, and both teams for taking us through what was a very delicate and very difficult rates process. But we've got there now. The rate has been struck. Whether people agree or disagree, that's where we're at, and hopefully we'll see the council move forward in a positive manner. Thank you all very much for your attendance today.
Thank you, Mayor.
All of the officers and all the councillors for all of their hard work around this issue. Thank you. That's our meeting closed.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you. Bye, members.